I am an outdoorsman. I'm very experienced in hunting, camping, hiking, and general survival. I'm very familiar and used to wildlife, and I was charged by something otherworldly. It charged me and my cousin. It was not a bear. A bear cannot move how it did, and it was not a normal wolf, as they can't comfortably run on two legs, whereas what charged us seemed natural at doing. This happened around June or July of 2007, I believe. I was around 17 years old and more cocky then, but still somewhat knowledgeable of the outdoors. My family used to own a cabin in NW, Wisconsin. I basically grew up there in the summer. I knew the woods well, but at night it was wise to stay in the cabin, or at least by the bonfire by the beach, because of bears, wolves, and cougars. One of the creepiest things was if you were having a bonfire, the tree line was visible from the fire pit and beach, and at night you always felt like you were being watched from that tree line. But during the day the woods always seemed normal. Not so creepy, that is, until this incident. So this happened somewhere between 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. Me and my cousin were having an airsoft battle. I was in full woodland camo, he was not. I retreated onto the ATV trail into the woods for a tactical advantage, and our battle took us about 200 meters in to about a third of the way up the trail. We had enough at this point and were standing at the edge of a clearing on the trail talking, and he was maybe 10 feet from me. When I decided to mess with him, I shushed him and said, "We're being watched." He froze. But that's when I realized the woods were dead quiet, which is a usual sign that a predator is near, and I got spooked and started scanning the tree line, but while scanning at the other edge of the clearing is when I saw it. Its teeth gave it away. It was panting and staring at my cousin. I don't expect you to believe me, but what I saw was a wolf as big as a black bear, but with a torso of man, with reddish-brown fur, at least 300 lbs. This wolf was on two legs, crouching next to a tree with its clawed hand grasping the tree. I told my cousin that we have to go, and next thing I know we just booked it, and I looked back at the wolfman who had locked on and sprinted, a few steps on 2 feet, then dropping to all fours. It was abnormally fast and sounded right on our tails, barreling through the brush, but for whatever reason let us go. When we broke out of the tree line and headed for the cabin, what stuck with me the most was the sheer size. The wolf-like creature appeared to be nearly 7 feet tall when upright, and where it should have had front paws, it appeared to have large clawed hands. Now, I'm not sure how to explain it away rationally. I have heard wolves will occasionally kind of walk upright, but as far as I know, they can't sprint on 2 legs. Nor do wolves get that big, and black bears more waddle on 2 legs. The closest description is silly, like a werewolf or dogman. I'm a boy and I live in North Carolina. I was 15 at the time of my encounter and was definitely not a believer in anything supernatural, paranormal, or anything of the sort. It happened while I was at a local summer camp. There was absolutely nothing special about that day. No weird lights, people, animals, sounds, nothing. My age group had just finished lunch and was able to persuade our counselor to let us play a game called Scatter Down by the Lake. It's like a giant hide-and-seek game in the woods. Now, we had played this at least 20 times before that day, and nothing weird had happened to any of us. And we all grew up playing in the woods, so it's not like we had an aversion or fear of it. But for some reason that day when our counselor shouted "scatter," and I ran to find a hiding place, it became a whole new ballgame. I had run as far as I could while still being able to see the lake, as were the rules, and had found a huge old uprooted tree that I decided would be the perfect hiding place. So I laid down as close as I could against the ground and waited. I had been there for about 5 minutes when I suddenly heard a voice calling my name in a weird, dreamy-like voice, and not just any voice. It was my mom's voice. Now, me and my mom are extremely close, thick as thieves, so I'd know her voice anywhere, and I would swear on my own grave that it was without a doubt hers. But I knew it couldn't be her. She was 20 miles away at work. And even if it had actually been her and she'd come to pick me up early, the voice wasn't coming from the lake. It was coming from further out in the woods beyond the border of the camp. I knew I should have run away from this strange mimic mom voice, but I couldn't. It was almost hypnotic. It messed with my thoughts and gave me doubts like, well, it could be mom. Or what if she's hurt, and I have to get to her? All these things were flooding into my mind, like someone had broken a dam I didn't know was there, until they finally overwhelmed me and emotions got the better of me, and I took off running in the direction the voice was coming from. I ran as far as I could with only this strange voice as my guide. I couldn't have run for more than 5 or 7 minutes when I got to a clearing and the voice suddenly stopped. When I entered the clearing and didn't hear my mom's voice calling me anymore, I finally think clearly again and started to have little alarm bells go off inside my head saying, "You idiot!" or "That's not mom," and run. but I couldn't run. I didn't know where to run. I had gotten so far away I had lost sight of the lake by camp and had absolutely no idea where I was, and I was completely exhausted to boot. With no other options than to sit and catch my breath, I did just that. No sooner had I sat down, more warning bells went off in my mind. I quickly did a 360 survey around the clearing and noticed a strange noise. It wasn't the voice before, no. It was the distinct sound of chattering teeth, like if you were cold. Only there was no one else around, and it was the middle of June in North Carolina. There's no way someone could be cold. And that's when I heard it. Leaves and sticks crunch on the edge of the small clearing. And I realized something was watching me. And then whatever it was moved in fast in circles around the clearing, almost like it was circling prey. And it was at that moment I knew whatever it was had led me out, there away from the rest of my group, exactly like the predator my instincts had been screaming at me that it was. Without any other option other than to try and escape, I took off in the direction I thought I came from and sprinted as fast as I could, all the while hearing the chittering of teeth and sticks crunching behind me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't dare turn around, see what was chasing me. I knew that if I did would slow down, and I absolutely would not. It felt like a lifetime running away from this thing before I finally saw the lake. And even though I didn't think I could, I ran faster than I ever have in my life when I broke the tree line and ran to the lake where I knew my friends were. At that point, I felt safe enough to stop and look back and see just what had been chasing me. But when I did, I only saw a fleeting form, running back the way I had come, and the distinct sound of chittering teeth. When I finally found my counselor, who was the seeker to find all of us, I was hysterical with fear and hugged her as tight as I could. When I finally calmed down, she tried to get me to tell her what happened. But I just asked, "Were you calling my name?" Before she even said anything, I already knew the answer. After all, it had been my mom's voice that led me away from everyone else. But what she said replied with was so much more bone-chilling to me. She told me, "No one called for you. We didn't know you were gone. Everyone is still hiding. The game isn't over yet." This story took place at a church camp, which is sort of like a Christian summer camp, when I was 8 years old. It started at night when I was trying to sleep. It was hot, and I felt like something heavy was sitting on my chest. Not like a weight, but like a hand. I could feel each individual finger pressing down, almost like it was trying to pierce my chest with its fingertips. I wanted to open my eyes, but I felt like if I did, something even worse would happen. Not just to me, but to the other kids in the room with me as well. Instead, I just laid there in my bunk, trying not to keep it from knowing I was awake. After a few hours, it stopped and left. What I saw when I opened my eyes was a tall, skinny figure with long arms. It had black eyes with red pupils that almost glowed in the dark, large hands with slender fingers, and a mouth so wide if it opened its mouth it would look like a hole. When I woke up in the morning, I felt a burning sensation on my chest. When I looked, I saw red marks where the thing had touched me. Things were pretty much normal until the middle of the day, when everyone would go to the main building, where we would all attend church and pray. While we were in the middle of a prayer, I opened my eyes to look up at the front of the room, and I saw the figure standing in front of me, and when I saw it, it put one hand over my mouth and pushed the other hand into my chest. It didn't tear a hole in my chest. Instead, it just went inside like it wasn't there, but I could still feel it inside my chest, its hand wrapped around. My heart, not a squeezing feeling, but a burning feeling, almost like a red-hot fire poker touching bare skin. I was crying the whole time, trying to pull its hand out of my chest, but I wasn't strong enough, and it only stopped after the prayer was over. It just disappeared and was gone, but I could still feel the burning sensation in chest. After we were done in the church, the day continued like normal, like the thing was done doing what it needed to do. After this incident, I never went back to church camp again, and I also stopped going to church because I never wanted to see that thing ever again, and to this day, I'm happy to say that I haven't seen it since. Something was happening very wrong in that hospital. I was born and raised in a little town called Maplewood, Pennsylvania. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and life was simple. My dad was a mechanic, and my mom ran the only grocery store in town. We didn't have much, but we had each other, and that was enough. Growing up, I was just like any other kid, curious, always exploring the woods near our house, getting into trouble here and there. But what really got me were the stories the old folks in town would tell. Ghost stories mostly. Haunted houses, creatures in the woods, that sort of thing. I loved hearing them, but I never really believed in any of it. Fast forward a few years, and I'm in my early 20s, trying to figure out what to do with my life. There weren't many jobs in Maplewood, so I ended up taking a job as a security guard at St. Mary's Hospital in the city. It was a pretty old building, built way back in the early 1900s. The place had history, that's for sure. The walls seemed to whisper secrets, and sometimes, late at night, you could hear strange noises echoing through the empty halls. I didn't pay much attention to it, though. I figured it was just the building settling, or maybe a rat scurrying around. My job was mostly uneventful. I worked the night shift, so it was pretty quiet. I'd make my rounds, check the doors, make sure everything was locked up. It wasn't exactly thrilling, but it paid the bills. Most nights, I was alone in those long, dimly lit corridors. The place had a way of playing tricks on your mind. The shadows seemed to move when you weren't looking, and sometimes I'd hear faint whispers, but I always shrugged it off. I told myself it was just the wind or my imagination. But then came that night, the night that changed everything. It was a cold, rainy night, one of those nights where the wind howls and the rain pelts against the windows like it's trying to get in. I was making my rounds, just like any other night, when I heard it. A faint noise coming from one of the old deserted wings of the hospital. The East Wing, if I remember right. That part of the building hadn't been used in years. Not since they'd moved most of the patients to the newer section. At first I thought it was just the wind, but as I got closer, I realized it was something else. It sounded like footsteps, slow and dragging, like someone was shuffling across the floor. My heart started pounding in my chest, but I told myself it was probably just a homeless person who'd somehow gotten inside. It wouldn't have been the first time. I followed the noise down the hallway, my flashlight barely cutting through the darkness. The air was cold, colder than it should have been, and there was this smell, like something rotten. When I turned the corner, I saw her. She was standing at the end of the hallway, her back to me. She was wearing a hospital gown, the kind they give patients, but something was off. Her legs were all wrong. They were bent backward, twisted in a way that shouldn't have been possible. I froze, my heart in my throat. For a moment, I thought it was just a trick of the light. Or maybe I was seeing things. But then she turned around. I'll never forget what I saw. Her eyes, they were black, completely black. Like there was nothing there but darkness. And that smile, it was twisted, unnatural. Like her face had been stretched into a grin. But the worst part was the way she moved. She didn't walk. She ran, her twisted legs carrying her toward me faster than anything human should be able to move. I didn't think, I just turned and ran. I could hear her behind me, those awful, twisted legs slapping against the floor. But the sound was wrong, like bones breaking with each step. The lights flickered above me as I ran, and I could feel her getting closer, her breath cold against my neck. I wanted to look back, to see how close she was, but I knew if I did, I wouldn't make it out of there. I ran faster than I ever thought I could, my feet pounding against the tiles as I raced toward the main entrance. My lungs were burning. My legs felt like they were going to give out, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't let her catch me. Just as I reached the doors, I heard a scream, a high-pitched, blood-curdling scream that echoed through the hallway. I don't know if it was her or me, but it was enough to push me through those doors and out into the cold night. The moment I crossed the threshold, everything went silent. The footsteps stopped, the lights stopped flickering, and the cold, oppressive feeling that had been pressing down on me vanished. I stood there, gasping for breath, staring back at the hospital. She was gone, but I knew she was still there, hiding in the shadows, waiting. I quit the next morning, told my boss I couldn't do it anymore, and I packed up and went back to Maplewood. I never told anyone what happened that night. Not really. I mean, who would believe me? But I can still feel her eyes on me. Even now, like she's watching, waiting for the right moment to come back. I don't go back to the city much anymore, and I stay away from hospitals whenever I can. But every now and then, when the wind howls just right, or when I'm alone at night, I think about her. About what I saw, and about how close I came to never making it out of that hospital. And I wonder if she's still there, haunting those halls, waiting for the next poor soul to come across her path.